ないのか激しい風のささやきが君にもきらめくはずさ焼けつく愛の稲妻が空を
Welcome to the Super Sentai Buddies. This is episode 3 of You Only Liveman Twice, the internet's best and only podcast dedicated to Liveman. I know I'm supposed to say the Something Sentai Liveman, but I forgot what it was because we don't do this that often. Every week that we do this thing, I and Mark watch an episode of this show. We share our thoughts with you, the listeners. My name, of course, is Matt J. With me, as always, on these is my co-host and buddy, Mark. Mark, how you doing today?
I am doing all right, man. We are now 1 day removed from me having finished my family's taxes, and there's always, and I'm okay with taxes. I get them, but there's always that kind of looming sense of existential dread that accompanies them regardless.
Oh, yeah. No, taxes are... Taxes cause me a undeniable and unending amount of like existential horror.
Right.
And they're never even that bad. Like I had a bad taxes year 1 year because I was living and working abroad for part of that year.
Right.
And then I came back and got 2 jobs. So it was just a nightmare. And ever since then, tax season just really throws me off my game.
See, this was my bad year. So I have... For the first 11 years of my professional life, I worked for the same corporation, and it's a government entity, so they were very good at getting my taxes correct on out of my payroll. So I never really had to sweat taxes. This year, for a bunch of reasons, this is not a joke or a gag, I had W-2s from 5 different companies this year.
In 2 different states.
I lived in 2 states. My wife owned a small business. I both sold and bought a house this year. So I was just living in paranoid fear of my taxes and finally forced myself to confront them just so I could stop living in that fear.
Well, good for you. We are not even into the part of the year that I think of as tax season because the idea of doing my taxes in February, frankly, has never occurred to me. So yes, we are here. We are watching Liveman. Dave was suddenly unavailable this week, so Mark offered to step in, which we always appreciate. Not only because I appreciate his time and contributions, but also because it is very fun to do these.
Yeah, it is. And with any luck, we will be recording this and going live with the episode in about 3 hours. We'll see how that goes.
We are watching episode 3 of Liveman today. It is called Oblar's Devilish transformation. But Mark, before we get into that, we have our officially award-winning opening segment, Shining in the Heavens There Are 5 Stars. What is our first star of the week?
This might be the most obvious of stars, but first star this week is the Olympics.
Yes, there are 5. Shining in the Heavens, there are 5 Olympic rings this week.
I love the Olympics. I have since I was a kid. Unapologetically, they're really fun.
Yeah, they're good, guys. The Olympics are very good. And they're finally easy to watch this year.
Yeah, boy,
we complained about it last week because they hadn't started yet and we didn't know how easy it was going to be.
Now, I still think if you do not subscribe to some manner of television package, NBC is still making it a bit of a pain.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But at least it's all out there and streaming online now.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier, I think, to just like pay Hulu or pay like the Sony PlayStation cable like package to be able to do it.
Yeah, you could basically buy like a 2 weeks worth of streaming service, and that's a lot cheaper than paying for a year worth of cable.
Yeah. Now, this is what's really exciting about this is that now that everything is done sort of on demand and streaming, there are entire events that prior to the advent of this sort of watching the Olympics, I knew existed, but you would never actually see them, right?
Yeah.
Unless you stayed up until like 2 a.m. and watched it on MSNBC. But now you can watch curling any time of day, just any time at all.
It's fantastic. They've got all of their different feeds on their various channels, but also available through Hulu and on their website. So you can just kind of click around and select as you please.
Or if you are like me and at your desk at work, you have 2 monitors on your computer, you can just have one of the monitors, the monitor that you're working on, and the other monitor, just 8 hours of luge.
That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I was watching a lot of luge and ski jumping today.
Last night, as I was reading a bit of Oathbringer, the third of those Stormlight books. I had the Olympics on and turned down and was just watching some mixed doubles curling, which was great.
Yeah,
and then
there was an American mixed
skating.
doubles team that were siblings. I think they're out of the competition now, but they were very fun to watch.
I don't know when we as not just a nation, I think we as a world decided that curling was like our kitschy fun sport, but I'm kind of glad we did. It is fun.
I genuinely think it was the advent of streaming Olympics coverage. Because now there's just a button that you can click where you watch curling, whereas before you never saw it.
Here's a weird
Unless
thing.
you were in Canada.
I think this was NBC. I was talking to friend of the show Brian about this morning. After last year's Olympics, curling had a little bit of a minute. I don't remember why. It might have been because streaming was starting up. But NBC did like an 8-week run of Saturday night curling.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if they did it in other seasons and I just didn't follow up. But for 8 weeks on Saturday nights, I watched like Canadian local curling competitions on NBC. It was fantastic.
There are a couple of other weird things that I like about this year's Olympics. I get no end of delight out of the fact that since Russia as a nation was not allowed to enter the Olympics this year due to some doping scandal from the previous Winter Olympics.
Right.
But there are still like 125 Russian athletes in the Olympics. Yeah. They are competing as the Olympic athletes from Russia. They do not get a flag. They don't get a national anthem. And the really funny thing is that they don't get to wear like interesting looking uniforms. Like it is as though they're being punished by having to wear like sackcloth when they're competing. Like the curling outfits are just like, it's like a black polo shirt with a name tag, basically.
Yeah.
It is like, and every time that you hear the announcers have to do like verbal gymnastics to try to avoid saying like Russia is doing X.
Right. It's going to be very interesting for hockey.
Oh, yeah. Well, hockey's going to be real weird altogether this year because no NHL players are playing.
Right. And outside of the NHL, the best league in the world is the Russian Super League, the KHL.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still fielding a very professional hockey team, whereas most of, Czechoslovakia and some of the other countries have their own super leagues that are of varying degrees of talent. But Russia's fielding still a very legitimate team. They don't have Evgeny Malkin or Alexander Ovechkin, but they're still fielding a very good team. So they're the hands-on favorites. They can't. I like hockey. I don't want to waste a lot of time in this star talking about hockey. But Russia.
The only thing I was thinking about was I was tickled by the idea that there could still be a Czechoslovakian league, despite the fact that Czechoslovakia hasn't existed in 20 years.
Yeah, I probably said the wrong thing there. There was a Czech Super League. I believe, I can't remember what it's called now. But
that is one of those countries that does not exist and will never stop being in my brain.
Yeah, because it was there when we had maps in like second grade or whatever.
Yeah, when they were drilling me on maps,
right.
That's what was on them.
But anyway, Russia has been, talent-wise, probably second only to Canada, maybe even a coin flip, for the last 3 or 4 Olympics. Basically since the rest of the world started playing pros.
Mm-hmm.
So Russia used to be this dominating monster in hockey. The last 3 or so Winter Olympics, they could have on paper been the best, or at least the second best behind Canada. They've barely managed to steal like 1 bronze across those. They've underperformed very, very badly. So
yeah, I was going to say, I know in Vancouver, the gold medal game was U.S.-Canada.
Right. So this year, Russia fielding far and away the best team because the NHL isn't playing this time, may actually manage to win it, except for it can't be credited to Russia.
Right. Anyway, the Olympics are great, and it's stuff like that. It's watching sports you never get to see. It is the sort of pageantry that you normally only get in professional wrestling. I love it, and I'm very excited to, pretty much as soon as we are done recording this, I'm going to go back into the other room in my apartment and watch more Olympics all night.
Well, that's what, yeah, same. I mean, I'm not going to another room in my house because I'm going to just start editing this podcast and then mute the Olympics on the second screen on my home computer and watch some Olympics while I do.
So, Mark, what is our second star of the week?
This is a short one, which I guess can maybe make up for the 10 minutes we spent on the Olympics. But it's a significant one to me, and that is this week, Saturday, so just like 2 days ago, I had a piano delivered to my home.
Oh, nice.
It's the first time. I am 35 years old. Mm-hmm. It is the first time since I finished college and moved out of my parents' house that I've had an actual piano in my house. So I've made do with, like little keyboards, portable keyboards and the like, but I've never had more than, I think, 44 keys at a time. And I am very, very excited. The new house that we're in is larger. The living room has a lot more space. So we had a piano brought in, and I can actually sit down at a real piano and maybe remember how to play the piano again.
That is very exciting. I know when I was growing up, I've never played the piano, but we had a harpsichord in our house. And it was one of those things that, like, we knew somebody who had a harpsichord who just, like, wanted it out of their house. Not because they didn't like it, but because it needed some repairs. But, like, just having a harpsichord in your house is a pain in the neck. And so we're like, we will move that to our house. And then it sat unrepaired for maybe 8 years. Wow. And then it moved on to somebody else's house. No one ever, like, paid to have it, like, moved from one place to another. It just ended up in the back of a truck and got traded around.
Well, that is the thing about playing the piano. There used to be a lot more people that played the piano than there are now. So it's not actually hard to acquire a piano. There are a lot of people with a piano in their house that is basically just like a family legacy piece that takes up a lot of room in your living room.
Oh, yeah.
My goal was I want to be able to... So I took piano lessons for the better part of a decade. I haven't played consistently in a long time. But my goal is to be able to basically, like, I want to be able to play Christmas carols when we have a Christmas party. Like, I want to have a Christmas dinner and then have everyone gather around the piano for carols. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, and plus that gives you a full year to, like, get back into the swing of things.
Exactly, yeah.
Right on. Well, very cool.
What is star number 3 this week, Matt?
Star number 3 is another sort of international competition, a little different than the Olympics. On a couple of days ago on Saturday, a buddy of mine had a birthday party.
On Piano Day?
Yes. The internationally recognized holiday. So on his birthday / piano day, we got together at his place and we played Axis and Allies.
Oh, man.
And when I say Axis and Allies, you might be thinking of one version of this game.
Sure.
But there is... Like, it's a board, you've got the people, it's cool.
Right.
But I just realized that what I just said was the most vague and useless description of any board game of all time.
You just
have
described
the board,
Candyland.
It's got some people, and it's cool. No, here's what I'm trying to offer distinction on. There are new versions of Axis and Allies, which is if you are unfamiliar with it, a board game about World War II. Like one person plays Germany, one person plays the U.S., one person plays the U.K., that sort of thing.
I think it's fair to say it's one of the more significant board games.
Yeah.
Because we live now in this crazy board game renaissance. But during the long, dry era where board games were basically like Snakes and Ladders and Candyland, it was
BC,
out
before
on the
Catan.
front line. Yeah, yes. Axis and Allies was out on the front lines doing complex stuff.
Yeah. So Axis and Allies, now that we are in this board game renaissance, is doing even more complex stuff. Yeah. So it is now broken up into 2 separate games, the Atlantic Theater and the Pacific Theater,
Nice.
Both of which are about twice the size of the original game. But you can also put, like, they're compatible with each other. So you can push both of these games together. It's like 4 boards that are like comprise an entire world map that you need to like make sure you have a large enough table in your house to play on.
That's amazing.
And the game, like, we played it, literally, I showed up to this guy's house at like 9:30 in the morning. Other people were sort of trailing in around like 10:30. We probably started playing in earnest around 11. And our side conceded the game, I think, around 10 p.m.
Wow.
And we only conceded because at that point we were trying to look a couple of turns ahead and didn't see a way to win the game.
And
but
it
if
was
we
10
had
p.m.
Yeah, but if we had wanted to slug it out, we could have played that long again the next day. Like,
wow.
It is a massive game and like, if you were the sort of person who gets into like war games or World War II history, there's a lot of really interesting stuff in there. Like,
yeah, you were describing it just a little bit to me via email earlier today, and it was hitting all of my history major buttons.
Oh yeah, like there's no, like there's all the major powers, but then also there's just Chinese resistance fighters, and there are like special rules for Chinese resistance fighters.
Wow.
And like, they really are in there like slugging it out with Japan, slowing them down as they're attacking the eastern section of the UK team that's centered in India. And then you've got like ANZAC, the Australia and New Zealand armies, like down in, Australia and New Zealand, just like floating around in the South Pacific. And there's a lot of like political stuff where like Germany and Russia don't start off the game at war with each other because there's the Molotov-Ribbentrop like non-aggression pact.
Wow, that's great.
Like, I mean, listen, I fear that I am in danger of doing what you did with hockey with World War II history here. But suffice to say, it was a really fun time. We did not win the game, which was pretty sad. Apparently, the UK will sometimes surrender. But yeah, it's super fun. If you have...
That sounds amazing.
If you have 6 friends and 3 days and really like playing games about World War II, give it a shot sometime. Now, Mark, what is our 4th star of the week?
Short and sweet, our 4th star of the week is a series of books. And I'm going to say this, I'll ask you to bear with me, called The Number One Ladies Detective Agency.
Now, I am familiar with this series because I used to work at a bookstore, but I've never read any of them.
So I've been doing this thing, which I'm trying to read a bunch of books this year. It's a personal project I've been working on. And because one of the rules is they have to be new books, and because I am not made of money, I cannot purchase 100 new books in a calendar year. So I've been shopping a lot of used bookstores, but also like the clearance racks of Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I've bought a number of books new because I think it's important to support authors you like by buying them new instead of secondhand where you can. But I've hit so they. But
you can't do that 100 times,
right? So I forget which store it was in, but they had a marked down box set of the first 6 books of The Number One Ladies Detective Agency. And frankly, at this point, I'm just looking for volumes. So 6 books for $12. But it turns out they're really good. They're written by, I think, a British guy named Alexander McCall Smith. They're about a ladies' detective agency in Botswana, modern-day Botswana.
And it's modern day. For some reason, I always thought it was set back in, like, the 30s or something.
There's a little chunk of the first book that is. So if you ever just, like, picked up and looked at the first book, the first couple of chapters are. That may be where you got that impression.
Okay.
But they're basically just like they're a good detective story meshed with like the small world optimistic charm of Anne of Green Gables.
Okay.
And they're just like, they're comfort books. They're not, they're 250 pages, maybe, very easy reads. I can knock one out in a day, but they're just really fun and charming.
So they're like James Herriot books if he was trying to like solve a murder instead of like help a cow.
Yes, exactly. Except for murder, that's too high profile for The Number One Ladies Detective Agency.
Oh, okay.
They direct those to the police.
So what sort of crimes do they solve?
Infidelity is not uncommon.
Okay.
The occasional like missing family members, that sort of thing.
Okay. I can dig it.
So it's just like personal detective work.
If there is not already like a BBC series of this, I am genuinely surprised.
I think there was. I'm not sure if it was the BBC or one of the other like lower British channels, but I do believe they did 2 seasons of this show at some point.
Because that sounds perfect for British television.
Yeah, I'll have
like
to look it up.
Low
and get
stakes,
back to you.
pleasant mysteries.
That's 100% what it is. It's like it's kind of like a more friendly Doc Martin.
Okay.
Anyway, what's number 5 star as we plow on into our 22nd minute?
Number 5 star, this is another short one, mercifully, is Movie Pass. I just got a Movie Pass, Mark.
Every time I hear about Movie Pass, I think I should buy that thing, and I never do, but I love movies, and I always think I should.
Okay, here's the thing, if you're not familiar with Movie Pass, you, through some complicated thing I'm not going to bother explaining, you pay $10 a month to the Movie Pass organization, and you are able to go to a movie theater every day and watch a movie.
One a day, right?
One a day. And the thing is, there is no way in which they are making money on this. Like, this is not sustainable unless they are able to, like, really turn a corner on something.
Yeah, there's some venture capitalism going on there, some projected profits, things like that.
Absolutely. So I love going to the movies just as like a thing to do in an evening.
I'm with you.
And I feel like there's no way that this Movie Pass thing is sustainable. And so I want to get in on it now so I can have like a beautiful golden period of just seeing a ton of movies again. Because I used to do that all the time in high school. But that's because in high school, movies were $5.
Yeah.
Because, this is because I'm old, but like there are tons of movies that I saw in high school that were they were the sort of things I would have never seen now, because now I only go to the movie theater if I have like a plan and a group of 3 people or more. Whereas before, you just go to the movies, and sometimes the one you wanted to see was sold out, and you see Remember the Titans, even though you don't really like football movies.
I had the exact same high school experience, and in fact, on my wall in my recording studio, right beside my desk, there's a corkboard, of the type where you like pin up pictures of your vacations and that sort. One of the things I have pinned up is a ticket stub from July 3rd, 1999 for the Wild Wild West.
Oh, I love the Wild Wild West. That's on Netflix right now.
The cost of that ticket, $3.25.
Or I remember in college, there was a local theater in Grove City that was like $2 or something.
It was cheap, yeah.
And it only had one screen, so if you wanted to go to the movie, you just saw what movie they were playing.
Right.
Which was sometimes good.
Yeah, I saw, of all strange things, I saw Shanghai Nights at that movie theater.
I know you did. I was there with you.
That's right.
Good movie. Anyway, speaking of good and fun things to watch, it is time now for us to watch episode 3 of Liveman, Oblar's Devilish transformation. We're going to go check that out, and we will be right back. All right, welcome back. So we have just finished watching episode 3 of Chojuu Sentai Liveman, which I looked up during the break. And dudes, Liveman, still good.
Still so good. Also, Liveman is still not messing around.
No, not even a little bit. I've gotten a little soft because O-Ranger started off very raw, and then 9-10 episodes in really took a turn towards the goofy.
Right.
But if Liveman ever does that, it has not done it yet.
We open up in this episode on outer space, which I know we do every episode because that's where Professor Bias lives, but I always love a good outer space cold open.
Yeah, and their space station satellite has a very good evil look to it.
It does. And the first thing we get in this episode is Professor Bias, who you may recall was the lead bad guy, the number 1 bad guy, is talking to one of his 3 generals, who also were the 3 previous schoolmates of the Livemen, about this general's basically mad science experiment on himself.
Yeah, see, I really like this because Professor Bias is called Professor Bias, but I did not realize until this episode that his relationship with the three, like, former evil students, like, he is their professor. Like,
Yeah.
this dude, Go, who is, like, the third guy of the three, you know, like, there's the main dude of the three ex-former students, and then there's the woman who is made out of guns, and then there's the third guy who we don't really have much on, who has, like, a big floppy bow tie. That's Go.
Yeah. He very briefly in season 1, or episode 1 rather, very briefly had a weird bat face that I tried to describe, and we get another look at that very briefly here. But he has so far been the lesser of the big three, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, so this dude, he has handed, like, basically he's handed a binder with his thesis statement and, like, notes on what experiment he wants to run to Professor Bias.
Yep.
Like, and Bias is like, oh, okay, let me take a look at your experiment. Okay, yes, this is good. In fact, this is necessary to show how powerful the Brain Army Volt is. Like, this is a wonderful experiment. I see that you are the subject of it, so you got to be very confident.
Yeah. That never ends poorly.
No, not even a little bit.
I do. So the structure of Liveman, I have watched just a little bit ahead because I really like Liveman.
Okay.
Is basically going to be this for a while. Now they're not always experimenting on themselves, but he really, like, the professor thing continues to be a major plot point, and all of the, like, the monster of the week guys are experiments of one of the big three, of Dr. Kemp, of Dr. Mazenda, or Dr. Oblar. So that's kind of our hook for how the monsters
really
are being
like
created.
that.
Yeah, it's really cool. So this week is Dr. Oblar, whose human name is Go.
Yes, which is not to be confused with Joe, who is the Yellow Ranger.
Right. They will spend a good bit of time yelling at each other later, and it gets a little complex.
Yes. So Professor Bias is excited because this is going to show Liveman just how pitiful humans are. And then he very, like, gently grabs a hold of Go's face and is like, this is the last time that I will ever see this face.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Oh, yeah. And it cuts to... And that's when it cuts to the title card of the episode, which is, of course, Oblar's Devilish transformation, or Oblar's demon transformation, or Oblar's monster transformation, depending on which bad fan sub you're watching. Because sadly, Liveman is from, like, before the time period cutoff that Shout Factory has been translating and putting on DVDs. So it's kind of a crapshoot what you can find out there.
It sure is. On the back end of the title card, we have, I think just two, but we have a short sequence of normal, everyday Japanese teenagers getting attacked by our monster of the week.
Yes. Now, I was unable to decipher this thing's name because when they pulled up the actual name card on top of this dude, the writing was in white, but there was also, like, a flash of lightning in that same moment.
Yes.
And I kept trying to pause it to write down the name, but I could never quite get it.
I'll give you the easy way out. His translated name is Virus Brain.
Okay, that's a lot easier.
So a lot of the brain monsters are going, like Sentai shows do. They're going to have names in the formula of, X name Brain. This guy is Virus Brain.
Okay, so Virus Brain he's sort of walking around and sloshing audibly.
Yeah.
He's got a bunch of,
just
water bottles. He has these little, like, reservoirs of, like, this green gunky liquid, but they do genuinely just look like disposable water bottles that someone turned upside down and, hot glued into this thing's costume.
He is the lowest rent Bane.
Just got that terrible, terrible venom.
Yeah. And what he's doing is just, like, strolling around Japan, injecting unsuspecting teenagers with this Gatorade venom.
Yeah, and I don't... The weird thing about this is that this is just an experimental phase of his project. Like,
Yeah.
Go/Oblar does not have any need for these teenagers to be infected. That's not part of a greater plan. He just wants to see how it works before he does it to himself.
I think what makes this episode very interesting is that Virus Brain is sort of the B villain of this episode, even though he's the monster of the week.
Mm-hmm.
This is much more a story about Go or Dr. Oblar than it is about Virus Brain.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we're using the name sort of interchangeably. This episode is more or less the episode about Go completing his transformation into Oblar.
Yes. Yeah.
Both physically and mentally.
As far as most of the episode is concerned, Virus Brain might as well just be like a device, a weapon, a gun that someone is shooting people, is using to put the virus into people's veins. He's really he's a non-entity for most of the episode other than to shoot people up.
Yeah, I think the only reason that he is a separate character is they needed to have someone to get murdered by a giant robot at the end of the episode.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
One of the two teenagers that Virus Brain attacks is a guy who is a boxer who's just out for a boxing jogging exercise.
Yeah.
The sort of, he's jogging and he's shadow boxing in the park and stuff like that.
Sure.
So Virus Brain comes up to, get him with the viruses, and he does, but before he's able to really fully take him out, this dude, who's just some random guy, picks up a park bench and breaks it over Virus Brain's head.
Amazing.
It's so good.
It's not even he picks it up, but he wields it as though it weighs nothing. This dude is a real strong man.
Yeah, you kind of want to know how, what this dude's story is.
I do. He's great.
I know we have room for 2 more live men on this team. I kind of wish it was this guy.
Maybe it is. Who knows? So he, as well as the girl who was the first experiment, what we learn basically is it starts to mutate them. Kind of low-level mutation. Right now, it just looks like an over-aggressive hemangioma on the side of their face.
Mm-hmm. I say mm-hmm as though I know what that means.
A hemangioma is that, it looks kind of like a lifted rash. It's like blood that's kind of near the skin. My daughter had one when she was born. It took a few years to fade.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, it's a mutant gene. It's designed to mutate people. We don't really, that I remember, we don't see either of these two getting mutated beyond a little patch on their cheek.
Yeah.
But I guess that's why we have test subjects. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So the live men are able to, they get a good laser shot off on Virus Brain as Virus Brain retreats.
Yeah, they were just out motorcycling around and happened to be nearby.
So they're able to collect some of this green guck and figure out what it is. And as they're looking at it and trying to figure out what the deal is, what's his name? Yusuke, the Red Ranger?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, yeah, I remember I had this conversation with Go 2 years ago when I was training in the gym and he happened to walk past. And they go into the most insane conversation. Okay, so in this flashback, Yusuke is just on a weight machine, doing some training, pumping some iron.
He's getting his gym time in.
And Go walks past wearing his velvet jacket with tails and big floppy white bow tie.
His cool boy outfit.
Sure. And Yusuke says, hey Go, how you doing? You should train with me, lift some weights, get into shape.
In the
that's
way
a cool thing.
In the way that all jocks do, which is seeing anyone who is not a jock and saying, your life would be better if you were also being a jock.
Right.
No judgment, that's fine. You should take care of yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah, but Go does not see it this way, and he goes into a straight up supervillain speech. Which makes sense amazing now, but when you this was before they had joined the Brain Army Vault. They were just classmates.
This was just his school buddy.
Yeah, and the fact that Yusuke hears Go say this and does not immediately think like, oh, I should tell the the principal, like my classmate Go is clearly a murderer, or like about to be a murderer.
So Yusuke is telling him basically, hey, you should take care of your body, and Go says, yeah, exercise is for suckers. I believe, and I think I have unlocked the secret to a virus that I'll just be able to inject in my body and make myself awesome without any of that garbage exercise.
And I will show you that your bodies are worthless and
human bodies are pitiful.
Yeah, so like I have the true power and I'll prove it to you someday. Someday.
Yeah, he's basically like he's more or less has his fingers steepled up in front of his nose.
Yeah. And in this moment, Yusuke is like, oh, all right, I guess I'm going to go back to working out. You have fun with your virus thing.
Never to think of it again until 2 years later when he's standing in a strange underwater robot base.
Robot turtle base,
yeah. So one thing I didn't realize, I stuttered a little bit there, coming to this idea, is that their robot pal, their robot sidekick for this episode, Colin, is like a crazy science robot herself.
Like so she is a scientist, you mean?
Yeah, she's not just like a helpful button pusher. She's analyzing this goo. She is already talking about how she can retro-engineer a cure from it.
Oh, yeah. That is a very good point. This is a very well-programmed robot.
Yeah, this robot is on top of it, which I think was really only just thrown in there so they could say, don't worry about those two kids from earlier. They're not going to show up again. You don't have to worry about them.
Right, we only paid them for the afternoon, so we're not going to do a second shot of them, but they'll be fine.
Now, what happens next is my favorite thing in this whole episode, which is they say, they agree, the three live men agree that they need to go look for Go and stop him from doing this.
Yeah.
So to search for him, they just run out into the middle of the woods.
And find him.
It works. So I spend a lot of time talking about the Hercules, the Legendary Adventures television program.
Mm-hmm.
This is basically Hercules' move. This is what he does. When he needs something to happen, he just walks out into the middle of the woods and waits for that thing to happen.
And it just always does?
It does. And there is all of Japan. And they just run out into the middle of the woods. And sure enough, they hear Go essentially like crying out in pain.
Yeah, because Go has either found or set up a laboratory in like a rented office space in the middle of the woods. Yeah. And the three live men run in and they see that Go has gotten himself like plugged into the syringe stuff coming off of Virus Brain and is shouting, yes, infect me more. And like he's not transforming yet, but he definitely is beginning to like show signs of whatever infection it is.
Yeah, it's starting to take hold. I'm going to correct myself. A minute ago, I said my favorite thing was running out into the woods. That's not quite true. There's an even better thing coming up soon, but we'll get there. So they see him kind of thrashing around, very clearly in pain, but also very clearly in like a state of heightened awareness and pleasure. He's excited about what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, he has decided that he wants the ultimate body and is willing to lose his humanity for it.
Right. So when they show up, Virus Brain blasts the live men, and then those the putties, the Jimmers show up.
And they're all sort of fighting in this lab until eventually Zhou is just like chucked out a window.
Yep, he just blasted out a window.
And he falls down the hill for a while, for like a good long while. This thing is like right on the top of a pretty tall hill.
The perspective of how this forest works is very vexing to me because people are constantly falling off of hills and cliffs in this episode.
Right, they never seem to be going back up a cliff, but they are always falling off of one. When Joe gets to the bottom of the hill, almost happenstantially, he lands on the inert body of Go, who has at some point in the fight apparently also gotten thrown out the window. I completely missed this.
I think he sort of stumbled out himself when the fight started, maybe? I don't know.
But when he does this, Go looks at Joe and says, like, oh my gosh, I'm so infected. You have to help me, please.
Yep.
Like, things are pretty bad for me right now.
Yes, he is begging for mercy, effectively.
Mm-hmm. Now, you would not think that Joe would be willing to help him because,
sure,
as we know, Go, especially as his form of Oblar, definitely did murder like a bunch of people that Joe knows.
Yes, including two of his very best friends, even before he was Oblar. Oh, yeah, that's right, and Professor Hitachi.
Like 2 days ago.
Yeah. But Joe is strangely moved to help. He picks him up, slings him over his shoulder, and a minute later, Suke and Megumi catch up. Yasuki and Mizumi catch up. And Joe offers his explanation, which is my actual favorite thing in this episode.
Yes.
He saved a drowning puppy at the beach.
Yes, and that is why Joe is willing to help him. It is like he saw him do that, and he's like, okay, like for the rest of time, like this is the moment that has imprinted on me with this dude. So even though I know he is like actually a murderer,
an actual human murderer,
I saw him save a drowning puppy. Oh, and he didn't even succeed in saving a drowning puppy. Like Go ran into the water to try to save this drowning puppy. But Go couldn't swim. Like he was so like into the moment of trying to save this puppy that he forgot he couldn't swim. So he ran out and started to drown, and then Joe had to go out and save him and the puppy.
And it is an extended flashback scene. We spend a minute on this beach.
Yeah, like we cut to later that night when Joe is like drying out his clothes on a line over a campfire.
And it's just this amazing scene of this dude thrashing around in the ocean. Not like he stumbled into some river or something. In the actual ocean, just waving a small puppy above his head as he's getting knocked about by the waves.
Yusuke thinks that this is the stupidest thing in the world. He's like, dude, do you not remember the name of our first episode, which was Friends, Why Have You Sold Your Souls to the Devil? Yes. Like, this dude is gone. He is way far gone. You cannot bring him back. But Joe is unwilling to listen to this.
Yeah. In fact, in a minute, more of those gymmers will show up. And while Isuke and Megami stick around to fight them, Joe just runs off with his best friend / enemy slung over his shoulder. Kind of, not fireman carry, potato sack carrying him into the woods. That only lasts about 30 seconds before he trips and drops him down yet another hill.
He runs over to him and says, like, oh my gosh, Go, like, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? And Go says, oh, I'm so thirsty. Please go get me water. And Joe is like, oh, cool. There's a stream over there. I'll just go get you some water. And I am at this point thinking, how is he just going to collect water?
I had that same thought. In fact, I imagined him. This is what I expected. I've watched a lot of these shows. I imagined him like cupping his hands together and trying to run back with a cupped handful of water. And, like,
yep, that is also what I was thinking.
No.
What in fact happens is he finds like an empty and hopefully mostly clean like tuna can
with the serrated lid still on.
Oh yeah, and it's like the worst kind of can to try to carry water in because it's like it's wide and flat as opposed to deep. Like,
yeah,
when he's rushing back with this water, but while he is rushing back, Go is starting to chuckle to himself, and he is affecting his change into the sort of monstrous form we saw in the first episode.
Yes, and at this point, the entire cast of this show just suddenly shows up in the middle of these woods.
Right, not just the other Livemen, but also the other two, like, evil generals.
Yeah, and in a minute we will see also Gardnoid Gash.
Yeah, who's just sort of floating around.
Just hanging out. So Go has finalized his transformation into Monster Oblar. There's a
Yes.
brief intermediate step where he looks like he did in the first episode. So you might remember Beautiful Beast Kemp or Machine Mazenda being the alternate kind of monster bad guy forms of his buddies.
Mm-hmm.
He briefly stops at that step and then ratchets it up. And suddenly Monster Oblar isn't just this weird Batboy looking thing, but he's a full-on rubber suit creepy guy.
Oh, yeah. He is. And, like, it's not the best rubber suit creepy guy costume, but you can tell, like, this is a look.
And the
This guy is
transformation
never
scene
going back.
is pretty solid. The transformation scene for being a 70s television program, it's a pretty solid transformation scene.
Oh, yeah. And he turns then to Dr. Kemp and Dr. Mazenda?
Mazenda, yeah.
And it's like, hey, you transform into the beautiful beast, and you transform into, like, a gun lady, but both of you basically still have the shape of humans.
Yeah.
And that sucks.
You are not committed enough.
Right, like, we are here to destroy humanity. Why would you bother to still wear their shape? I have transcended humanity, and now am a goofy monster.
He declares himself the greatest genius.
He does do that. That is 100% true.
And Joe makes like one last effort to appeal to his friend and just gets backhanded across half the scenery.
Yeah, and then he turns to him and says, You are no longer Go or a friend or anyone else. Like you have run out of identities. Now you are just this thing that I have to shoot with a laser.
And now finally it is henshin time.
Yes.
Very late in the episode, actually.
Yeah, pretty late. There's been a lot of fighting in this episode, but not a lot of like transformed fighting, which actually in the early episodes tracks in other seasons as well.
Yeah, you're right.
The fight's going pretty well. Joe does definitely get knocked off a cliff once or twice, but he is fighting Oblar while the other two are fighting the Gibblers, you were calling them?
Jimmers, I think.
Jimmers.
Which I know just sounds like your southern redneck cousin. But there you have it.
They are all doing this.
We learned that Oblar can heal like Wolverine.
Yep. Oh, yeah. I have it in my notes as a healing factor, which is, as of course we all know, what Wolverine does. The opposite of Omega Red's mutant death factor.
Right. And eventually, Virus Brain just kind of strolls his way back into the fight.
Yeah, and now they have like an actual target that they can aim all their cool weapons at. So they summon the Biomotion Buster, which, if you remember, is like their giant cannon. And in the sort of hilariously old special effects, zap him with a laser. He goes down. The Gardenoid gas shows back up to make him grow with the Giga Phantom cannon.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, Gardenoid Gash and his Giga Phantom cannon.
Gardenoid Gash is a cool looking dude. I don't know why
really
that dumb
is.
robot face works, but it does.
I wonder if he's ever going to be a character in this show, or if he's just like the dude who carries the Giga Phantom cannon.
I think his official job is he is Professor Bias's bodyguard, bodyguard.
Interesting.
Yeah. But he shows up with Giga Phantom and he makes Virus Brain grow giant sized.
Yes. We cut back to Grand Taurus or Tordos or whatever the thing's called, the base, the floating turtle base,
right?
Where Cullen is launching out some machines to go help them. And Mark, I don't know what the translation you were watching said, but when she launched that thing, she said that she was launching the machine buffalo in my translation. And I don't know how that could possibly be true.
I have no idea. It's just like it's like a heavy armored transport vehicle.
Yeah, it looks sort of like a really chunky, like space shuttle, sort of.
Yeah,
that opens up and it has all of the other like robots in it. So it's got Jet Falcon and Aqua Dolphin and Land Lion.
It looks not unlike a slightly more colorful Jawa Sandcrawler.
Yeah, with like little tiny wings on it.
Yes, yeah. And what I found interesting about this, and surely this has happened before and I just didn't put it together, the Livemen don't summon their ships. They are deployed by the robot back on the floating island base, who is monitoring the situation via like audio and vital signs in the suits and things.
Which is very cool. I think that is a cool role for Colin to have.
Yeah, I like it.
Those things immediately combine into Live Robo, who is a very cool looking robot. Got a big lion chest. One of the things I like about Live Robo is that he has a giant laser pistol.
Yeah.
Which I love it when something that is very big has an accessory that is relatively small.
Right.
Because, like, of course, that means that there's, like, a one-handed laser pistol that is the size of, like, you know, a train car or something. But it's got, like, this little trigger on it. It's very good.
It is. It's a good look. And he, of course, has the Super Live Crush, which is his finishing move.
Mm-hmm. Because all Sentai robots must destroy things with that giant sword.
Yep, that's what you do.
I love it. Love it every time.
Consistent with the early going of the Sentai shows, by the time Live Robo shows up, there's not a lot of options here. There's not a lot of variation. Mm-hmm. Live Robo shows up, shoots the pistol, does the sword hit, and we're kind of out.
Yeah, which, you know, that's fine. We've already gotten enough out of, like, Virus Brain was not really gonna give us, like, a really fascinating fight.
Yeah, that's not what he was here for anyway. He's mostly here to be a transporter for some insane mutant virus.
Yeah, and also he's just here to take the L so Oblar can get away.
Right.
Which he does. So, like, when we are done with this, Oblar and the other two generals have gone back up to space to rejoin the Professor Bias, and our three live men are back on Earth, not transformed anymore, and Zhou is so frustrated that he is kicking cans into a local reservoir.
Yeah, yep, standing on like the top of a reservoir bridge, literally kicking an aluminum can into the water.
A lot of just aluminum cans sitting around in this episode.
Yeah. It's a shame he couldn't have found one of those when he needed to transport a drink.
Yeah, I know, right? And he's not just sad that Oblar like got away. He's really upset that Go is basically gone, you know, like, and that he was wrong. You know, he believed in Go. He was willing to sort of go on a limb for him, and the fact that he was wrong about him, like, it hurts him a lot.
Yeah, and this is a hefty take-home for a children's program, because so his buddies show up. Sugi and Meg show up, and their take-home isn't like, don't worry, we'll keep fighting for him, there's got to be some good in there somewhere. The lesson is, we must forget the idea of saving them.
Yeah, like, they are too far gone. And, like, sort of to put a point on this, Yusuke picks up a rock and throws it, because the can that Zhou had kicked into the reservoir was still kind of floating.
Uh-huh.
Yusuke picks up a rock and throws it at the can, and the can just sinks into the reservoir.
It is a very kind of maudlin, dour ending to this episode.
Yeah, although I do think it's the sort of episode that they kind of had to do early on in a show like this, because otherwise there would always kind of be a thing in the back of your head like, didn't these guys go to school together? Like, shouldn't they... Yeah. Like, they shouldn't have given up on them this quickly. So it does make sense that they did this, but, like, boy, it's a rough one, dudes.
And it ends with, I wrote in my notes, a cool bridge pose. So the fade out of this episode is the three of them on the side of the reservoir bridge, just kind of posed and looking pensive. And it's a very classic comic book shot. I know it's a live action show, but it's the scene they end on, the last frame, is a very classic comic book frame. I really dug it.
Yeah, it is it's a well shot scene in a well shot episode.
Yeah, it was I think as the first two have been, just another really good entry, really solid episode.
Yeah. So yeah, that is this episode of Liveman. I continue to dig this show.
Yeah, me too.
I kind of don't have a lot other things to say about it. And
Yeah.
we're not putting this brain virus onto the Creature Royale because, well, A, because he sucks, and B, because we're just
Right.
we're not putting these guys on.
That would be too hard with differing hosts. Why the Creature Royale works is you have the same two guys. My list would already be different from yours, so it would be impossible to insert this guy in there. We could do a real quick, like we used to, a real quick high points and low points, just so I can talk about that drowning puppy one more time.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
So, like I mentioned earlier, high point of the episode, definitely drowning puppy, but also just the idea that running out in, like, we need to find a guy. Where should we go? I don't know, the forest, I guess?
Okay, here's what I love about this, because this would have been my high point, is that their plan is not to look for them. Their plan is to find him, and they do it immediately.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Like, you just got to restructure how you're phrasing these things to find success. That's the secret.
You got to speak your truth to power, man.
Yeah, just put it out in the universe, man.
Another very brief high point is just Gardnoid Gash. He was only here for a second, but it was a great second.
Yeah, it was. I don't know, for low point,
Yeah, there wasn't much not to like.
not
about
much.
this episode,
Joe's
honestly.
weird idea to try to carry water inside a can he found in the woods.
That's a very good point. An old serrated tin can. That could be our low point.
Joe is a scientist. He was at the Science Academy. I think he's very smart. He should not be giving, like, tetanus water to a guy he is trying to rescue. But if we have nothing else to say on that, then Mark, thank you again for stepping in on this.
Man.
Where can people find your other show?
You can find us at Mount Olympus Pod, Gmail, Twitter, Facebook, or the easier way to do it, look up Retrograde Orbit Radio, which I know you say later, at RO Radio on Twitter, or just the webpage. You'll see our show. You'll see this show, a couple other things we got kicking around. Spectre, which I don't know if you've talked about on this program yet, but Spectre, which is a great podcast that you are hosting. I am in love with that show.
Mm-hmm. We've got a new episode coming out in the next week or so.
Yeah, well, Thursday. Do we drop that on Thursdays? I think that's right.
I think so. That sounds about right. And with that I think is going to do it for another episode of You Only Live Man Twice. A promise that apparently we have not kept because we have now live manned 3 times.
Yep. Yeah.
But I think it was worth it. Before we finish up here, I would like to remind you all you can email the show at supersentaibrothers@gmail.com. If you want to get any updates on future episodes and check out the things that we're talking about on Twitter, we are at Super Sentai Bros. If you like the show, please remember that shining in the iTunes reviews section, there are 5 stars. Please rate and review and subscribe on wherever it is that you get your podcasts. That is what's going to help new people find their way to the show. If you would like to find our other shows, as Mark said earlier, you can find them all at retrogradeorbitradio.com. Once again, we are the Super Sentai Buddies. I'm Matt.
I'm Mark.
And we'll see you next week for the greatest show on Earth.
Liveman